On our 6th wedding anniversary, my husband said he had a surprise for me. I waited on the mountaintop for over 3 hours. He never showed, not even when the rain poured down. Meanwhile, his childhood friend posted a location update from a hotel halfway down the mountain. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. In the photo, they lay together on a bed of rose petals, fingers tightly intertwined. His ring finger was bare, but across his chest were red scratch marks and faint bite marks. A wave of disgust washed over me, and I left a comment beneath the post. Bitten by a dog? Better get a tetanus shot. Chapter 1. The moment I saw the photo, my first thought was simple. Ethan was dirty, and I didn't want him anymore. So when he called something he never did to explain himself, I just said 2 words. Divorce. There was a pause on the other end before he spoke again. Grace, stop being so unreasonable, okay? Audrey and I grew up together like siblings. What's so wrong with joking around? It's only people with dirty minds who see dirt everywhere. And besides, we just bumped into each other and it started raining. She hasn't been feeling well, so I didn't want her getting sick. I only brought her to the room to wait out the rain. The more he explained, the guiltier he sounded. I cut him off, annoyed. I'm still at the top of the mountain. I had waited there for him for 3 hours, standing in the pouring rain for another hour. There was no shelter, and I wasn't about to risk heading down the slippery path alone. Ethan seemed startled that I was still there, his tone shifting to concern. Stay put, I'm coming to get you. Another hour passed. Even after the rain stopped, Ethan was nowhere to be seen. The path down the mountain was slick and treacherous, and just a few steps in, I was covered in mud. I sneezed several times, feeling as though my heart had sunk into the muck beneath my feet. Miserable and disgusted. When I finally made it home, I took a long, hot shower. Then I saw Audrey had posted another update. No rain can keep me down, my knight in shining armor will always take me home. Ethan, who had never liked or commented on anything I posted, replied under hers. I'll always protect my princess. I refreshed the page and suddenly, his comment disappeared. A single line remained. Had he blocked me? My head throbbed. I swallowed a couple of cold pills and collapsed into bed. I had barely fallen asleep when Ethan pulled back the covers. Why didn't you wait for me? I'm starving. Get up and make me something to eat. And while you're at it, make an extra bowl of ginger soup. Audrey got a little wet in the rain, and I'll take it to her later. I jolted awake, my headache intensifying. Didn't Audrey feed you enough? I snapped. Ethan shot up from the bed, glaring at me, his face red with anger. Grace! Can you stop this? Haven't I explained everything? I was late because of traffic. Do you have to ruin our anniversary over this? I went through all this trouble to plan a surprise for you. He tossed a small box onto the bed, and it accidentally hit the corner of my eye, the sharp pain bringing tears to my eyes. Ethan was startled, rushing over to check if I was hurt. But as his hand came closer, I caught a strong whiff of a familiar fragrance. It was Audrey's shampoo. I could practically see his hands tangled in her hair, his expression soft and tender. Disgusted, I pushed him away, my gaze falling on the box that had landed on the floor. The necklace had tumbled out, a piece I had wanted for so long, but now Audrey had one just like it. Only the cheap, fake shine of mine revealed everything. In this marriage, Audrey got the real necklace and the real love. All I got were lies upon lies. I didn't even bother asking who the surprise at the mountain villa was truly meant for. It's a.m. now. I slowly lifted my head to meet Ethan's eyes. Our anniversary is over and so is our marriage. Chapter 2. All right, stop saying things in anger. I want to take you to the hospital. Ethan glanced at the blood seeping from the corner of my eye, concern etched on his face. Ignoring my weak state, he forcibly pulled me from the bed, insisting on taking me to the hospital, pretending to be the caring husband. I was so groggy that I didn't even grab a coat. The car was freezing, so I hugged my stuffed bear tightly. As I looked down, I noticed something strange. My favorite bear now sported 2 oversized fake eyelashes. It felt like a blatant jab. Ethan noticed my reaction. When I picked Audrey up the other day, she thought the bear was cute and stuck those on. She's just a kid, don't take it personally. I'll buy you a new one tomorrow. That bear had been a gift from my late grandmother. I carefully wiped its face, my heart aching, not wanting to say anything more. Just then, Audrey called. Is that old hag asleep yet? Forget her, come have a drink with us. Mike and Sam are here too. Ethan glanced at me awkwardly. She's right next to me. Then bring the country bumpkin, sis-in-law along. She shouldn't be living like such an old fossil. Seeing Audrey's location on his phone, Ethan immediately turned the car around. I don't want to go. I want to go home. I protested. The mention of drinking stirred up unpleasant memories. It was the first time I met Ethan's friends. Despite dressing carefully, I was ridiculed. They knew I couldn't hold my liquor but still pressured me to drink. They even took photos of my drunken state and posted them online. Meanwhile, Ethan had left me alone and drunk in the bar to take Audrey home. I woke up surrounded by lecherous men. Though the manager intervened, the fear from that night still haunts me. Ethan had long forgotten it. Stop being so selfish. What's wrong with me catching up with my friends? I never interfere with your social life. Then let me out. I'll go home by myself. My head was pounding, and all I wanted was some rest. I didn't have the strength to argue with him anymore. No way. If you disrespect my friends, you disrespect me. You're coming. His stubbornness flared up again. Noticing my discomfort, he softened slightly. Just say hi, and we'll leave right after. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. By the time we arrived, it was already past a.m. Audrey greeted Ethan with an enthusiastic hug, then looked me up and down. Sis-in-law, you sure know how to make an entrance. Still holding a grudge? Women are so petty. If Ethan and I wanted something more, it would have happened long before you came along. With that, they warmly pulled Ethan to sit, leaving me standing. There were only 4 seats, none for me. Hey, we've all been friends since childhood. There's no extra seat. Audrey said, flashing me a smug smile. Why don't you just head home? You wouldn't understand our conversation anyway. The 4 of them had been close friends since childhood, and Audrey, being the youngest, was their darling. During my years of loving Ethan, I tried hard to fit in, to accept his friends and become part of his world. But every time we gathered, Audrey would reminisce about the past, mock my background, and talk about things I couldn't relate to, leaving me feeling sidelined. Sensing the awkwardness, Mike stood up to offer me his seat. Sis-in-law, why don't you sit? Looking at Mike, a memory surfaced. He had often asked Ethan, what does Grace have that Audrey doesn't? Why did you marry her? And what did Ethan say? That was during a fight with Audrey. I married Grace on impulse. I regretted it early on, but I felt sorry for her after she'd pinned for me for so long. Thinking of this, I sighed softly. No need. We're divorcing. That should free up a seat. In a marriage of 2, there's no room for a third. Ethan stared at me in shock. In all our years together, it was the first time I had embarrassed him in front of his friends. In the past, no matter how late he stayed out drinking, I'd always pick him up without complaint. But now, I wasn't going to inconvenience myself for him anymore. Chapter 3. Mike and Sam quickly stepped in to diffuse the tension. Audrey sneered, gripping Ethan's hand. A woman who has to threaten divorce is pathetic. Ethan, visibly irritated, glared at me. Grace, have I spoiled you too much? Have you forgotten the days you begged me not to divorce you? I grabbed my phone and left without saying a word. I wasn't going to beg him anymore. When Audrey first came back from abroad, I had endless arguments with Ethan over how close they were, always acting like they were more than just friends. Every time Ethan would say, If you can't deal with it, then just get a divorce. Back then, I was still lost in the illusion of his affection, always apologizing and begging for his forgiveness. I had knelt at our doorstep, crying alone in the dead of night. But Ethan had taken my love and patience as an invitation to trample all over me. This time, I wouldn't back down. I went home, packed my things, and moved into the small apartment I bought before our marriage. It was part of my dowry, bought with my own hard-earned money. When Ethan found out I had bought an apartment, we fought. Only an idiot would buy such a tiny, out-of-the-way place. It's embarrassing. You should have used that money to buy a car. That way, I'd at least look good driving it. Later, my parents bought me a luxury car as part of my dowry, and that finally shut Ethan up. I was so glad I hadn't listened to him. That little apartment became my refuge. And the luxury car? It had long become Audrey's ride. By the time I finished sorting everything out, it was already morning. Unable to sleep, I printed out the divorce papers. When I got back home, I found Ethan standing at the door. I was surprised he had never come looking for me before. I said some things I shouldn't have last night, but you shouldn't have treated my friend like that. Go apologize to Audrey, and we'll forget all about it. As I walked out yesterday, I heard Audrey say, "Daughters of nouveau-rich families always have such nasty tempers. Marrying someone like her must be bad karma." To the outside world, Ethan painted me as a paranoid, jealous wife. But in our marriage, it was always Ethan throwing tantrums. He only showed his polite, gentlemanly side to others. At home, he was nitpicky and impossible to please. If I added scallions to a dish, he'd lose his temper, calling me useless and storming off. The one who owes an apology has never been me. I handed Ethan the divorce papers and headed to my room. Ethan followed right behind, pulling me into a tight hug from behind. "Stop acting like this. I'll apologize, okay?" His hands started roaming over me. "I know I've neglected you lately. I'll agree to have a baby. Will that make you happy?" I pushed him away and slapped him hard across the face. "Don't touch me. You make me sick." Ethan's cheek reddened immediately, anger flashing in his eyes. But before he could respond, I blacked out. Chapter 4. I woke up in a hospital. Ethan was sitting by my bed looking concerned. "Grace, I know you like to argue, but don't gamble with your health, okay? You really scared me with that fever. Don't you know why I got sick? Who left me standing in the rain? Who made me run around all night? Who said they'd take me to the hospital, but ended up going out drinking with friends instead?" Ethan looked away, clearly feeling guilty. "Let's not talk about that. I made you some porridge. You should eat." It was supposed to be seafood porridge without any seafood. Just a few sad grains of rice floating in watery broth, looking more like dishwater. It made me feel sick. Right then, Audrey walked in. "Ethan, the porridge you made was really good, but I'm still hungry. Come downstairs and grab something to eat with me." Ethan glanced at me, conflicted. "Go ahead." I tossed the porridge into the trash. "Audrey has a sensitive stomach." Ethan mumbled, embarrassed, trying to justify himself. But Audrey clung to his arm, urging him on. After a brief hesitation, Ethan said, "I'll bring you something nice when I come back." And left with her. I ordered takeout for myself, finished my 4, and went to the doctor to get some medication. The doctor glanced at me several times, confused. "That guy, is he your husband?" "Ex-husband." "Good. I was wondering. While you were unconscious, he and that woman in the short skirt were practically all over each other, kissing in the hallway and even by your bedside, as if this were a hotel." He handed me my prescription and his phone. "Leave your number. If anything feels off, you can reach out anytime." Seeing the expectation in his eyes, I got the hint and nodded. When I got home, I saw a message from Ethan. "Something urgent came up at work, so I can't stay with you. If you're feeling unwell, just text me, and I'll be there as soon as I can." Nice words. I remembered a time when I had acute gastritis, writhing in pain. Ethan got annoyed that I was disturbing his sleep and took his blanket to the study. If you're feeling sick, go see a doctor. What do you want from me? I'm not a doctor. So this time, feeling down, I contacted the new doctor I'd met instead. We went for coffee and did some shopping. It lifted my spirits. But when I got home, I was stunned. Chapter 5. My small apartment was packed with people. Both sets of parents, Ethan and Audrey, were all there, staring at me. Ethan's eyes were red as he glared at the divorce papers. Audrey stood there with her arms crossed, looking at me with disdain. You're shameless, Grace. Ethan treats you so well, yet you're out there flirting with other men. My mom was holding photos of me shopping with the doctor. What's going on? Ethan says you've been unfaithful and wants a divorce. Haven't you two always been happy together? I couldn't believe Ethan would stoop this low. Ethan's mom slammed the table. Divorce? We don't want an unfaithful woman in our family. No wonder you haven't been able to conceive all these years. It's probably because of your reckless behavior. A chorus of hurtful accusations rained down on me. I glared at Ethan, barely able to contain my anger. Ethan, stop twisting the truth. Do you really think I don't know what you've been up to? I was going to let you keep some dignity, but since you insist on being shameless, don't blame me for what happens next. I went to the bedroom and brought out a box. While moving out, I had discovered something even more shocking than Ethan's infidelity. I had been waiting for the right moment to reveal it, and now, that moment had come. Why did you marry me in the first place? You've loved Audrey for so long. So why choose me instead of her? Ethan looked confused. What nonsense are you talking about? I've told you countless times, I married you because I love you. Audrey and I are just childhood friends, nothing more. Audrey pretended to cry. Uncle, Auntie, I can't take this anymore. Grace has been slandering me and Ethan, ruining my life. She's trying to drive me to the edge. Ethan's mom comforted Audrey, clearly heartbroken. Ethan, looking anguished, said, I don't understand how you've turned into this. Blaming innocent people for your mistakes? Damaging a young girl's reputation. Grace, you've really let me down. I laughed coldly and threw the box of documents in Ethan's face. You picked me because my family was better off. Your family's company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and you needed my dowry to stay afloat. All these years you've been tangled up with Audrey. I have hotel records and surveillance footage, everything. Despite marrying into a wealthy family, Ethan's relatives always looked down on me for being new money. They thought I was calculating, unlike the innocent and straightforward Audrey. They claimed I was tainted by wealth, while Audrey was seen as refined and cultured. But without me, how would they be living the luxurious life they have now? Hearing this made Ethan panic. Chapter 6. Grace, stop talking nonsense. When have I ever used your dowry? I brought both families here today to give you one last chance. You don't need to twist the truth like this. I switched on the TV and played the video from the hospital. In the footage, I lay pale and unconscious in bed, while Ethan and Audrey were chatting and laughing nearby. When they saw I wasn't waking up, Audrey suddenly kissed Ethan. He hesitated for a moment but then deepened the kiss instead of pushing her away. The scene shifted to the hallway, where they embraced for a long time before reluctantly parting. I contacted that doctor to get this footage. I said, my voice shaky. I have more videos, including car recordings of even more intimate moments. If you want to see them, I can show you everything. Scum! My dad erupted with anger, grabbing a chair to throw at Ethan. If my mom hadn't stopped him, he might have charged at Ethan. My daughter was unconscious in the hospital, and you two were doing this at her bedside. How blatant can you be? Who knows how much my daughter has suffered in your family? I had lost track of how much I had endured. All I remembered was that, in the end, I got used to it. Under Ethan's constant manipulation and control, I dared not get angry or question him. I silently doubted myself and bore all the pain alone. Thankfully, that heavy rain woke me up and made me see this man I had loved for 6 years, who had deceived me for just as long. Mom, Dad, please let me explain. It's not what you think. Ethan's pride vanished. His face turned pale as he scrambled for an explanation. But faced with the undeniable evidence, what could he say? In the past, he had relied on my love and trust to deceive me repeatedly. But now, no one in the room would believe his lies. Chapter 7. I looked at Ethan calmly. Sign the divorce papers now, and I'll grant you a final shred of dignity. Drag this out, and it will be ugly for both families. I won't divorce you, Grace. Don't be so cruel to me. This is all a misunderstanding. I've only ever loved you. We've been married for 6 years. Don't you understand my heart by now? I briefly reminisced. 6 years. After the love faded, I couldn't find any evidence that Ethan ever truly loved me. He never picked me up from work. He never cooked a meal for me. The first and only surprise he prepared in 6 years was hijacked by Audrey. If I hadn't seen how he treated Audrey with such passion and devotion, I might have continued to deceive myself, convincing myself that Ethan was just a man who didn't know how to express love. But he made it clear, his affection for Audrey was evident in every gesture. Dream, it's common for men to socialize outside. These two kids grew up together, they might have overstepped, but it's not a big deal. Listen to me, you should have a child. Once the baby is born, your husband will settle down. I avoided Mrs. Johnson's touch. If you're okay with living like this, that's your choice. But I can't turn a blind eye. You've never liked me anyway and always wanted Lily to be your daughter-in-law. Now you can have your wish. But you must return all my dowry and the marital assets that were transferred out, every single penny. Everyone knew exactly where those assets went. With all eyes on her, Lily looked embarrassed. James, please say something. It's not like that, I didn't. James, who had always defended Lily, was silent. He walked over to me, looking pitifully at me. Please don't say such hurtful things. It makes me sad. As I tried to leave, he immediately grabbed my hand. Lily, feeling neglected, burst into tears and ran out. You're all ganging up on me. Fine, I'll just end it all, then you can be together without any worries. His grip on my hand instantly loosened. It was almost instinctive. James ran after her. He stopped awkwardly at the door and turned to look at me. Dream, I just can't stand by and watch her get hurt. Even if she were a stranger, I wouldn't ignore it. I smiled calmly without arguing. Memories of the past flooded my mind. Chapter 8. The biggest argument James and I ever had was when I discovered he had replaced my vitamins with contraceptive pills. I angrily confronted him. If you didn't want kids, you could have told me. Do you know how harmful an overdose of contraceptives can be? James nonchalantly retorted. Why should I care? I just don't want kids. If you don't want to take the pills, then we'll sleep in separate rooms. I couldn't understand his strong aversion to having children. Until I accidentally saw his chat history with Lily. Lily said, I can forgive you for marrying another woman, but I don't want to see you have children with her. I know your heart isn't with her, but children would distract you. I want to be the most important person in your life. I want all your love. That was the first time I considered divorce. I cried endlessly, feeling lost. I didn't even notice when I was being followed on my way home. When I realized something was wrong, I hurriedly called James. He dismissively said, Why are you calling me? Didn't you leave home because you were so tough? Handle it yourself. As I tried to call the police, the person snatched my phone. They knocked me down with one hit. Luckily, I had pepper spray with me and managed to escape. When James came to the police station to pick me up, he was condescending. Dream, look at you. Without me, you're useless, you can't even protect yourself. I'll forgive you this once for old time's sake. I've told you, Lily and I are just friends. Stop being jealous and live a good life with me. Be good, and I'll take care of you." He'd scold me and then give me a small comfort. Under James' constant manipulation, I gradually lost myself. Thinking back now, it's all so ironic. He cared about Lily's safety, the safety of strangers, but never about me, his wife. When I looked at the door again, James was already gone. I turned my gaze to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson and pointed to the door. "You should leave too." They wanted to plead with my parents, but my father didn't even spare them a glance. Finally, they left, embarrassed. The once noisy and crowded room suddenly became quiet. I looked up at my parents, and tears fell uncontrollably. Chapter 9. My mother pulled me into her arms. "If I had known my precious daughter would suffer so much, I would never have let you marry him." As the only daughter, my parents feared I would suffer, so they gave a large dowry when I got married. Over the years, they treated James' family with respect and provided various support, all to ensure they treated me well. But our family's generosity was met with disdain. "It's okay, it's all in the past. Come home with us. We'll handle the rest." I shook my head. Marrying him was my choice, and I need to resolve it myself. This small apartment was bought with my own money. I've grown up. I don't need to rely on others. I believe I can live well on my own. Over the years, I had relied on James. My daily life revolved around him. But now, looking back, I realize I'm not that helpless. Without him, I'll live even better. Our daughter has grown up. My mother gently touched my face. "Take care of yourself, and if there's ever a problem, talk to us. We'll always be here for you." My mother looked down. "We were wrong before, always urging you to make up after fights." I grew up spoiled and willful. James had always put on a perfect facade in front of others. So whenever I went back home after a fight, my mother would advise me to temper my attitude, saying married life is different from dating. They had no idea what I had been going through. And I didn't want to worry them by telling them. "It's okay, it's all in the past." Not wanting to dwell on unhappy memories, I comforted my parents and saw them off. After tidying up the room, I started looking for a job. Having been kept at home by James all these years, it was time for me to see the world outside. The next few days were quite relaxing. I planned to work outside for a few years before returning to take over the family business. After sending out a bunch of resumes, I ordered some of my favorite takeout. With a cup of bubble tea and some fried chicken, I curled up on the sofa watching TV. When there was a knock at the door, I thought it was the delivery. Opening the door, I found James standing there. He glanced inside, frowning slightly. "Dream, how did you become like this? I heard you're looking for a job. Why bother? Stay with me, and I'll take care of you for life. Give you the best." His eyes fell on the bubble tea in my hand. "You shouldn't be eating all this junk food every day. Are you serious? Did you forget that your so-called best life came at my expense?" Chapter 10. James had awked. Not the ordinary kind, but double standards. He wouldn't allow me, with my low blood sugar, to eat candy in the car, but he allowed Lily to eat chips in the car. He wouldn't allow junk food like takeout and bubble tea at home, but he was willing to eat street food with Lily. To maintain his high standards, I had to wake up at 6 every morning to clean and cook. Every meal was meticulously prepared. But how many meals did he actually eat at home? He hated my hair shedding, so I had to clean the floor several times a day. Yet Lily's hair was clinging to him right now. "Grace, marriage is about compromise. I know we've had our ups and downs, but we can work through this. You won't be better off without me. If you don't want to do housework, we can hire help. If you're bored at home, I can give you a position in my company. As for Audrey, I can cut her off. I've made so many concessions for you. What more do you want?" I remembered when we first got married, I was clueless about housekeeping. I suggested hiring help or splitting chores. Ethan looked at me with disdain. "Why did I marry you then? You're ugly and useless." Yet, for Audrey, he was willing to do anything. He could hold a bowl of hot seafood porridge and tell Audrey, "You don't need to know anything. I'll take care of you forever. In my heart, you'll always be my little princess." Remembering this, I shut the door with disgust. Ethan tried to block it, his hand turning red from the pressure. "What do you want?" "I want to take you home." James suddenly looked up at me. Tears streamed down his face. "I really do love you. Why can't you just believe me? My relationship with Lily is just brotherly care." That night, I had a bit too much to drink and acted impulsively. When I sobered up, I felt terrible about it. I thought about ending things with Lily and focusing on us. That time at the hospital, she told me she loved me and couldn't let go. She just wanted to kiss me and hug me one last time. I agreed because I felt sorry for her. Dream, believe me, that was the time I really intended to break things off with her for good. This was the first time James cried in front of me. And the first time he admitted his mistakes. Seeing him so remorseful and in pain, my heart, which had long been still, felt like a stone had been thrown into it. I took a deep breath and threw my bubble tea in James's face. The ripple in my heart wasn't softness. It was disgust. Chapter 11. James didn't dodge or get angry. He looked at me with deep sorrow. "Hit me if it makes you feel better. As long as you come home with me, you can hit or scold me as much as you want. Hitting you would only dirty my hands. James, if you have any self-respect left, you'll never show up in front of me again." "Dream, how can you be so heartless to me?" Ethan suddenly moved closer, grabbing my shoulders. "You were the one who pursued me first. You can't just say you don't love me anymore. As long as I don't agree to the divorce, you can't leave me." Before I could react, Ethan picked me up, trying to force me out. I struggled, tearing his shirt in the process. The red marks on his abs had faded, but the hickey on his collarbone was still visible. Ethan hesitated, instinctively covering it up. "It's not what you think. Mosquito bites, right?" I glared at Ethan, tears in my eyes. "How dare you touch me? Don't you find yourself filthy? Just looking at you makes me sick. Get out of my house or I'll call the police." Whether it was my words or my tears, something worked. Ethan stepped back, looking at me with a mix of hurt and hope. Finally, he left, eyes red. That night, Ethan sent me a video. He kept washing himself with cold water over and over. "Grace, I'm cleaning myself up. Please don't be mad. Give me another chance, I beg you." I blocked Ethan on all platforms and moved to one of my parents' vacant properties that night. I feared Ethan might show up again and do something drastic. Thinking it over, I contacted a lawyer to file for divorce. I prepared for everything, but overlooked Audrey. A woman in love is more determined than any detective. Audrey found me. "You bitch, you turned Ethan against me. Who do you think you are? I was here first. You're the one who came between us. Don't think you've won. I can easily make Ethan come back to me." I rubbed my ears, irritated by her shouting. "Please, go ahead. That kind of trash, whoever wants him can have him. I certainly don't." Chapter 12. Audrey hesitated, clearly not expecting my reaction. She tried to provoke me again. "Stop your tricks. There's a camera at the door. You won't get away with it." Provoking me, hoping I'd yell or hit her. Then she'd cry to Ethan, playing the victim. She paused, but before she could say more, Ethan showed up. He looked disheveled, reeking of alcohol masked by cologne. Seeing me, his lifeless eyes sparked with hope. "Audrey said you were here, I finally found you. You don't know how much I miss you. I haven't contacted her. I've changed, please believe me. I won't force you to do anything you don't like. I swear I'll never hurt you again. Don't ignore me." Audrey's glare intensified. To her, Ethan was always at her beck and call. She never imagined she'd need me to see him. "If you're here to sign the divorce papers, you're welcome. If not, I'll call security." Ethan stared at me for a long time. This time, he didn't dare touch me. Softly, he said. Okay, I'll sign. Just let me look at you a bit longer. I let Ethan inside. Audrey tried to grab his hand, but he shook her off in disgust. Once inside, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off me, as if he had 1,000 things to say. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the sofa, and read. Sign and leave. Grace, do you really have nothing to say to me? Seeing I wouldn't answer, Ethan started talking. He reminisced about our first meeting in a summer breeze. He recalled our 6 years of marriage. He said he loved me deeply. During this, a police officer called, saying Audrey had been in a car accident. Ethan coldly hung up and continued talking to me. It was a moment of weakness, if only I had resisted. He slapped himself hard. I know it's too late for regrets. I just beg you, don't hide from me. Even if I can only watch you from afar, I'll be content. I yawned. Finished? Sign and leave. Heavy rain began to fall outside. Tears streaming down his face, Ethan signed the divorce papers. Then he walked into the rain without looking back. The rain lasted all day and night. Ethan stood in the rain just as long. His family took turns trying to persuade him, but he wouldn't budge. It was a self-imposed punishment. I drew the curtains, shutting out the outside world. My love for Ethan began on a summer evening's breeze. It ended on an autumn night's downpour. From now on, I'd start a new life. Ethan and everything about him no longer concerned me.